Como substâncias psicoativas poderosas, as drogas psicotrópicas estão disponíveis apenas através da receita de um médico. Então, como é que os psiquiatras e companhias farmacêuticas foram bem-sucedidos em convencer milhões de médicos a receitar centenas de milhões de pessoas? As companhias farmacêuticas estão ansiosas por pôr os seus produtos no mercado assim que possível. Isto é, afinal, um negócio e cada dia pode valer milhões. Para assegurar o público e os médicos gerais que os seus psicotrópicos pouco testados são seguros, as companhias não se poupam a gastos para pôr os psiquiatras por detrás deles e os psiquiatras ficam felizes por receber o dinheiro.
It's really quite an interesting marriage that the drug companies have with the medical profession, and psychiatry primarily is a strong arm of that.
Esta relação nasce na escola médica.
You go to medical school and you learn that drugs are the answer. And then you go into residency and you're told about this whole armamentarium of psychotropic drugs. And if somebody's bipolar, you use this whole group of drugs. If someone's depressed, you use these drugs and so on. And that is the Bible. And when you're a believer, as psychiatrists are, in the Bible of psychiatry, or in that box called psychiatry, you're not likely to stray unless you begin to think for yourself.
E uma vez fora da escola médica, muitos desses psiquiatras crentes são recrutados por companhias farmacêuticas e treinados como oradores.
They know then who are the psychiatrists who are most easily influenced, and they can then invest in those doctors, take those doctors to whatever fancy resort to be educated about the latest, newest med, and those people then become the experts. They go and give the talks at the medical dinners, at the fancy restaurants, or at the drug-sponsored symposia at the American Psychiatric Association. They become the teachers in the residency training programs.
Uma vez que esses líderes de opinião tenham vendido aos psiquiatras nas suas áreas, eles então passam para médicos de clínica geral para os convencer a receitar drogas psicotrópicas.
So you have the psychiatrists coming in now and teaching at an OBGYN convention. They'll give papers there, or they'll do, designed to address GPs and teach the GPs how to look for and diagnose these diseases and these illnesses. And again, the psychiatrist they're the ones who are going to know. Like in the medical profession, most of the doctors will say, well, these guys are the specialists in the field. I'm going to listen to how they want me to do this so that I can do it in my own practice, and they'll follow that lead and that influence, all funded by the drug companies.
A formação dos médicos começa em conferências médicas como estas, onde a educação médica contínua mandatória pelo governo, ou cursos de CME, são ensinados.
I'm required once a year to have so many units of postgraduate training, and so I have to go to get my hours by approved training centers that the state recognizes, and those approved training centers are run by the drug companies.
Mas longe de serem educacionais, estas conferências são frequentemente produzidas por firmas de educação médica contratadas por companhias farmacêuticas, e os seus seminários são normalmente conduzidos por psiquiatras pagos por companhias de drogas, que podem pagar mais de $2.500 por uma simples conferência.
Most of the continual medical education conferences and courses are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies, and so I can guarantee you they're not going to have doctors talking about the risks of using their medications.
O propósito destas conferências é claro. Como um dos materiais de educação médica da companhia diz, seja qual for a combinação de audiências que precisam de motivar para exercer o máximo de influência no mercado, podemos ajudar-vos a identificá-las, a alcançá-las e influenciar o seu comportamento. Como estratégia de mercado, a CME funciona. Num estudo, as taxas de receitas de médicos seguindo conferências médicas de educação subiram 87% para uma droga e 272% para outra. Não é de admirar que a indústria farmacêutica agora gaste $1.000 milhões em 371.000 desses eventos em cada ano.
And as long as they're making money, they're going to do everything they can to subsidize medical education, medical journals, postgraduate medical education, including the educating of psychiatrists, to use as many drugs as possible.
E os psiquiatras pagos para dar estas palestras saem-se muito bem. Como, por exemplo, o Dr. Charles Nemiroff, da Universidade de Emory. Com laços financeiros profundos com quase 2 dúzias de companhias, o Dr. Nemiroff recebeu 2,8 milhões de dólares em dinheiro farmacêutico desde 2000 a 2007. Quando foi revelado que ele violou uma lei federal ao não declarar 1,2 milhões de dólares deste dinheiro para a sua universidade, ele demitiu-se como presidente do Departamento de Psiquiatria da Emory. Mas o Dr. Nemiroff não parou nos discursos e aparições pessoais. Também foi denunciado por ter laços financeiros a uma empresa de cujo aparelho médico ele fez uma crítica favorável numa revista psiquiátrica que ele mesmo editava. Numa outra ocasião, ele contratou 14 colegas da Universidade de Emory para escrever artigos para um suplemento de um jornal médico celebrando o 5º aniversário da introdução do antidepressivo Effexor. O jornal de Nemiroff é um exemplo de um grande problema. Num caso notável, o New England Journal of Medicine imprimiu um artigo cujos autores tinham tantos laços financeiros a companhias de drogas que, devido a limitações de espaço, o jornal foi forçado a listá-lo no seu website. Imprimidos, estes conflitos financeiros cobriam 3 páginas datilografadas sem espaço entre linhas. Mas vai ainda mais longe. Em muitas ocasiões, jornais respeitáveis foram enganados em publicar estudos escritos por escritores fantasmas das companhias farmacêuticas, mas falsamente creditados como psiquiatras proeminentes, que são pagos até 20 mil dólares para pôr os seus nomes nisso.
The pharmaceutical industry has set up companies that are educational companies, and they create papers subpoenaed evidence has found these papers where on the top it'll say author ? i.e. they haven't yet decided who to invite to be the author of this scientific paper.
A escrita fantasma é muito comum, tanto como 50% dos artigos de pesquisa psiquiátrica publicados são escritos por escritores fantasmas. Às vezes o psiquiatra pago pôs o seu nome no artigo e nem sequer olhou para ele. Tomem, por exemplo, o psiquiatra Dr. David Danner, que apoiou o Paxil como autor-líder num estudo publicado em 1995 no Journal of European Neuropsychopharmacology, só para admitir mais tarde que ele nunca reviu nenhum dos dados do estudo atual, mas assinou nos sumários em vez disso. Mesmo o oficial superior da FDA para a revisão dos testes clínicos de drogas psicotrópicas, o psiquiatra Dr. Thomas Loughran, assinou repetidamente o seu nome em artigos escritos por escritores fantasmas de companhias de drogas que promovem o uso de antidepressivos e antipsicóticos, psicotrópicos agora rotulados pela própria FDA, como tendo altos riscos de comportamento suicida e morte prematura. Para além da sua influência considerável sobre os fazedores de políticas da FDA, as companhias de drogas exercem um controle extenso sobre os jornais psiquiátricos por meio de orçamentos substanciais de publicidade.
Every other page is a pharmaceutical ad that they pay for, and so they are the livelihood of the journals. That's how they get published.
Medical journals are completely supported by the ads from drug companies. Without the ads, the journals would dwindle away.
Doctors look to scientific publications as the objective source. It comes from this university, this research being done by these, highly revered, very well-respected leaders in my industry. If I can't trust them, it's doctor to doctor. I'm not listening to those sales reps. That's different. This is doctor to doctor. I'm listening to the big guy. And, they've taken over that process. The scientific literature now, you just can't trust it.
Hoje, entre 2/3 e 3/4 de todos os testes clínicos publicados em grandes jornais são financiados por empresas farmacêuticas. E para influenciar os receitadores ainda mais eficazmente, as companhias farmacêuticas darão tanto como $1 milhão a jornais para artigos de testes favoráveis que eles podem depois usar como ferramentas objetivas de marketing. Mas o financiamento farmacêutico da psiquiatria vai para além disto. Após anos de pressão finalmente forçarem uma promessa recente para mudar, a Conferência Nacional da APA foi amplamente subscrita por companhias farmacêuticas, assim como os seus esforços de lobbies no governo. Mas os velhos hábitos são duros de morrer. Na recente convenção da APA, as companhias farmacêuticas estiveram lá a distribuir comida e a dar aos psiquiatras conferências promocionais chamadas teatros de produto.
And they get the vast majority of their funding for their associations, for their meetings, for everything from the pharmaceutical industry. So promoting pharmaceuticals is basically the only options that they have.
Com os psiquiatras já entusiasticamente a espalhar a doutrina farmacêutica para o resto do campo médico, as companhias farmacêuticas também atacaram médicos prescritores de outro flanco, usando exércitos de delegados de propaganda médica.
We always did a full frontal assault. So we always came in, our product's the best. Our product's the best, our product's the best. Are you gonna write it? Are you gonna write it? You're gonna write scripts? You know, this was kind of our mentality.
My job and my pay was based solely on my ability to push drugs through my territory. So if I wasn't moving enough prescriptions, if I wasn't moving enough pills through my territory, I was at risk of being fired, and on a lesser level, you know, I wasn't making the bonus money.
The bottom line for you was it was a business, you got paid, and you had to get as many prescriptions as you needed that doctor to write, and you did it however you could.
Uma maneira de conseguir pessoas para tomar medicamentos farmacêuticos é através de amostras gratuitas. Estas não são oferecidas por fabricantes de drogas psicotrópicas por caridade. Eles tencionam levar os pacientes a um regime de drogas do qual eles não possam sair.
Samples sitting on a shelf encourages a doctor to give that drug away and then to write an accompanying prescription for that, which will be later filled at the pharmacy.
And that's what doctors wanted, to be able to not only have the samples, but give them to their friends, their family, lots to the patients, because they know if they gave the samples, you had a higher incidence of being able to prescribe. The doctors would prescribe your product.
You're getting the physician comfortable with the drug, and you're getting the consumer comfortable with the drug. So let's say when the trial's over and the free drug's gone for the trial, what's the doctor going to do? Is he going to write a prescription of another product? Not if the patient's doing fine. You never want to rock the boat.
The industry and the companies fully understand that if you can get those drug samples into a doctor's hand, you're going to be able to get prescriptions out of that doctor.
They're actually a very effective marketing tool, and there's quite a large percentage of the marketing budget that goes into the distribution of samples.
Em 2003, os delegados de propaganda médica distribuíram amostras gratuitas no valor de 16,4 milhões de dólares. E para as venderem com maior facilidade, os delegados recorrem a outra arma secreta: informação sobre receitas comprada a farmácias por empresas de seguimento de receitas.
You'd get a list with like Dr. XYZ, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, Celexa, and it would tell you how many scripts, give or take, let's say 10, per month or per week, that physician was writing of those products.
So we knew everything about our doctors, which ones were the most valuable, which ones to spend the most time on, and what we needed to do, and where their weak spots were.
So it was very valuable in that you frequently, as the sales rep, knew better what the doctor was actually doing than the doctor did himself, because he wasn't tracking his own prescriptions.
A indústria farmacêutica agora gasta 22 mil milhões de dólares por ano a mercadejar aos médicos para aumentar as receitas, uns incríveis 90% do seu orçamento de marketing. E este investimento resultou. Hoje, as drogas psicotrópicas são um negócio de muitos milhares de milhões de dólares, sendo mais de 2/3 receitadas por médicos de clínica geral. Mas os psiquiatras são aqueles na frente a espalhar a informação. E quando o uso de drogas psicotrópicas é questionado ou obtém uma má publicidade, os líderes de opinião psiquiátricos defletem os ataques e desacreditam os críticos. Ou eles poderão simplesmente usar a sua posição para fazer todo o problema desaparecer. Por exemplo, o psiquiatra Dr. Daniel Casey, presidente do primeiro comitê de aconselhamento da FDA, que se reuniu em 1991 para decidir se uma etiqueta de aviso sobre aumento de risco de suicídio deveria ser adicionada à etiqueta do Prozac. Na audiência, membro familiar atrás de membro familiar apareceram para mostrar como o Prozac prejudicou as suas crianças e entes queridos. No final, no entanto, o Dr. Casey e os seus colegas votaram contra a etiqueta, citando falta de evidência. Mas o que muitos na audiência não sabiam é que 5 pessoas sentadas nesse painel de 9 membros tinham laços financeiros consideráveis com companhias farmacêuticas. O próprio Dr. Casey tornou-se o presidente de um painel de aconselhamento da FDA que votou para aprovar outro antidepressivo, o Zoloft, mais tarde nesse mesmo ano, e em breve tornou-se um dos mais procurados oradores sobre o Zoloft. Mas a corrupção vai para além dos psiquiatras na FDA. Diretores de grandes instituições psiquiátricas são também pagos generosamente pelas companhias psiquiátricas, como o vice-diretor do Instituto Psiquiátrico de Nova York, que num ano recebeu 140 mil dólares. Mesmo agências de governo não estão imunes ao conflito de interesses. Em 2006, o estado do Texas processou a companhia Janssen por transportar os oficiais de saúde mental do Texas para outros estados para promover a sua droga Risperdal. Incluído estavam bónus, gastos de viagens e honorários de discursos. Mesmo a nível federal, o chefe de psiquiatria geriátrica no Instituto Nacional de Saúde Mental foi condenado nesse mesmo ano por aceitar e falhar em declarar mais de $250 milhão de companhias de fármacos em troca de consultas, honorários e gasto de viagens. O resultado destes doutores de campanhas de educação pagos farmaceuticamente é uma explosão em receitas de drogas psicotrópicas, não apenas escritas por médicos, mas por muitos outros.
I know some practitioners start people on drugs, on the antidepressants. There's unfortunately, a nurse practitioner that does it, and she's not supposed to. It's not in her protocol. Another nurse practitioner I work with has told me that she keeps doing it.
It's gotten to the point where you have nurse practitioners, physician's assistants. There are times when that child doesn't even see a doctor. And we're seeing these prescriptions written for, and at best, the doctor may sign off on the bottom of that prescription.
Os profissionais médicos em todo o mundo estão a passar drogas psiquiátricas com aparentemente poucas preocupações, porque foram assegurados que são seguras e necessárias pelos peritos no campo, os psiquiatras.
The psychiatric community is completely responsible for the widespread use of psychotropic drugs. They're the ones writing the scripts to the large extent, and they're the ones that are proclaiming their supposed beneficial effects, and I think they're sketchy, the evidence isn't good, and the side effects are horrible.
The psychiatrists are the facilitator of the diseases, and therefore the prescriptions.
Hoje, mesmo organizações psiquiátricas não contestam que a parceria entre a psiquiatria e as companhias farmacêuticas em promover as drogas psicotrópicas a médicos é considerável e quase impossível de evitar. Mas desde cedo, esta parceria apercebeu-se de que promover a médicos não era suficiente. Como poderiam eles alcançar o seu objetivo demográfico, o consumidor final, e levá-lo aos consultórios dos médicos para exigir estas drogas?
This is Dr. Peter Breggin, and this is another in my Simple Truths about psychiatry. And the subject today is that psychiatric drugs are much, much more dangerous than you've ever been led to believe by the doctors who are prescribing them. I genuinely believe that if most people knew how dangerous the psychiatric drugs really were, most people would never start on them. And I also believe that if most prescribers had even the faintest idea how dangerous they were, they'd stop prescribing them. Well, how is it that so many people can be ignorant about psychiatric drugs? Well, the truth is because they're all getting their information from the drug companies. I mean, when was the last time you saw a car company leap up to tell people way in advance that they'd had some deaths on the road from their bad brakes? When was the last time the car companies went mea culpa and said, yes, our accelerators are sticking and running people down? Well, I can tell you the drug companies are even worse. They go to all kinds of extremes to avoid letting you know and letting your doctor know how dangerous the drugs are. I know this because I've been a medical expert in dozens of lawsuits against drug companies. I've looked inside drug companies and seen what they're really doing. I was appointed by a court in Indiana to be the scientific expert for over 150 lawsuits against Eli Lilly, suits alleging that the drug Prozac had caused violence, suicide, mayhem, mania, and psychosis. So I know what goes inside. I know as much as anyone about how dangerous the drugs are. So let me just give you a little brief outline of material you can find in the first half of my book, Psychiatric Drug Withdrawal. Obviously, the second half is intended to help you come off psychiatric drugs, because it can be very dangerous to come off drugs. It's dangerous and sometimes more than starting the drugs. Let's take a look at the stimulants that you may be taking as a college student or as a parent that you may be giving to your children. Follow-up studies on people who were started on stimulants as children show that they have shrinkage of brain tissue, measurable on brain scans. They have reduced height and weight. They're being incarcerated more often than other people. They're going to mental hospitals more often. Their suicide rate is increased. Every single one of these facts documented by follow-up studies of what happens to you if you get started on stimulants. And one particularly well-done study, the rate of cocaine abuse is greater when you become a young man or woman if you've been put on stimulants as a child. That's because the stimulant drugs, such as Ritalin and Concerta and Adderall and Dexedrine, they're so similar to cocaine in their effects. All right, let's look at another group, the sedative, sleeping pills that you're taking, like Sonata and Ambien, any one of the prescription sedatives used for sleep. We now got 2 or more good studies showing they shorten lifespan. You can Google them. You can Google practically anything I'm telling you, but you'll get more accurate and direct data from psychiatric drug withdrawal. Now, what about the benzodiazepines, the tranquilizers like Xanax and Valium and Ativan and Klonopin? They're very addictive. You know that people taking Xanax in controlled clinical trials, after a mere 6 weeks, a large percentage can't get off. After a mere 6 weeks, they become addicts to Xanax. Great for the drug business, great for your psychiatrist or prescriber who just wants to write prescriptions. Terrible for you. These drugs now, several studies show, like Xanax and Ativan, they're causing shrinkage of the brain too. Coming off them can be an absolute horror story. It can be harder to get off those drugs than to get off opiates. They leave people who try to come off of them with horrendous insomnia, horrendous anxiety, aches and pains in their body, such pain in their feet that they can't stand up, that it's just too much pain, weird feelings throughout their body, and then the realization as they come off that their minds aren't working as well, that they have memory loss for the past and have more trouble learning. Now, I know this is hard. You know, it's hard for me to even talk about it, but it's really time to face up to just how dangerous these drugs are. So we've looked at the stimulants and the sleeping pills and the benzos. Now the antipsychotic drugs, which are not really antipsychotic drugs, they're just lobotomizing drugs that are being given to some people for sleep, like Seroquel is being given to people for sleep, and Abilify and Latuda and Risperdal and Zyprexa. All of these drugs are very damaging to the brain. They virtually wreck a part of the brain called the basal ganglia. They cause a dreadful disorder, tardive dyskinesia. I've done a whole Simple Truth video about tardive dyskinesia. They're shortening the lifespan. We have evidence that people who are put on a lifetime dose of these antipsychotic drugs for whatever reason, whether it's to help you sleep at night or because that you're hallucinating and have a lot of problems, 20 years shortened lifespan. And we know some of the ways the lifespan is being shortened, because especially these newer antipsychotics, so-called second generation or atypical antipsychotics, they're even worse than the older ones in causing a metabolic syndrome. People get obese, they get diabetes, they get pancreatitis, they get elevated cholesterol, blood pressure is off. And then, since the drugs also cause heart arrhythmias and in combination with other drugs do even more cardiovascular damage, that's one of the ways in which people are having shortened lifespan on these drugs. The mood stabilizers, so-called, which are just flattening, emotionally flattening drugs. Most of them were originally anti-seizure drugs. The one we've studied for the longest time is lithium. If you stay on lithium for a lifetime, like your doctor tells you to, you're at grave risk of severe mental problems in the form of memory difficulties, learning new materials, conducting your affairs like you have your whole life. None of these drugs are good for your brain. All of these drugs are bad for your brain, and it shouldn't be any surprise. These drugs are producing multiple biochemical imbalances in brains that don't have any biochemical imbalance until a physician or prescriber puts you on the drug. Now, please don't just stop taking your drugs, because the ultimate tragedy is that coming off of them can be catastrophic. People can get suicidal, they can get violent. Some of the drugs, you can get seizures. Some of the drugs can drop your blood pressure if you're coming off. So, get good information. I put everything I know about it in psychiatric drug withdrawal. Get good information, get some good clinical supervision, work with your family or friends. The shorter time you're on psychiatric drugs almost certainly means that you'll have a better quality of life.